It's just a really strange cultural phenomenon how we treat the concept of gratitude.
No, absolutely.
I mean, like, if you tell someone you are feeling completely burnt out or just totally overwhelmed by your workload,
Hmm.
they might casually tell you to start a gratitude journal.
Right. And your immediate reaction is usually,
A silent eye roll.
yeah,
Exactly. If you are anything like most people, you just dismiss it. We have this deep-seated assumption that gratitude is this fluffy, transient psychological state.
it feels like a self-help buzzword, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It is the kind of thing you see embroidered on a throw pillow in a discount home goods store. It does not sound like a serious medical or psychological intervention.
But that assumption is completely wrong.
Which is why the mission for today's deep dive is to completely dismantle that throw pillow idea. We have our hands on this fascinating piece of research from SpiralSeekr titled Neuroplasticity and Gratitude.
And it really dives into the structural and chemical changes in the brain.
Right. It reveals that this supposedly soft concept is actually a hardcore biological intervention. Today, we're going to explore exactly how a specific gratitude practice systematically rebuilds the physical architecture of your brain.
It completely changes how you process and store positive experiences.
Yeah.
We aren't just talking about putting a positive spin on a bad day.
Wait, so we are talking about actual physical changes to the brain.
Yes, we are talking about altering physical brain tissue. What this source material demonstrates is that you are literally engaging in a construction project inside your own skull.
Wow. That is wild.
Yeah. When you follow the specific protocols outlined in the research, you're actively forcing your nervous system to lay down new neural pathways. You literally increase gray matter density in targeted regions.
Okay, well, let's set the stage before we start looking at the blueprints for this construction project. To understand how the brain physically changes, we first have to look at the environment we are starting with.
Right, we have to look at the baseline state.
Exactly. For an audience that already understands the basics of neurobiology, we know the amygdala is our threat detection hardware, right? It is what kept our ancestors alive.
Right, it is the brain's alarm system.
But the SpiralSeekr piece points out that in our modern baseline state, before any intentional gratitude work, we are heavily reliant on that amygdala. We are walking around in this low-grade, chronic survival state.
We really are. The baseline environment is characterized by a very specific neurochemical profile because the amygdala is constantly scanning for subtle modern threats. An ambiguous email, a delayed train.
Well, just a weird look from a coworker.
Exactly. Because of that, your nervous system actually suppresses the release of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin.
So their release becomes super irregular.
Right. And simultaneously, your cortisol levels remain stubbornly elevated to keep you vigilant. This creates a neural environment that is highly rigid and reactive.
I picture it like a highly sensitive, incredibly annoying car alarm that just will not turn off. You are just stuck in that blaring state.
That is a perfect analogy.
So how do we fix the core alarm? Because the research notes that the moment an active gratitude practice begins, the neurochemical profile measurably shifts. Dopamine and oxytocin immediately spike while cortisol drops.
Yes, it is a very sudden shift.
So if the amygdala is the car alarm, is the gratitude practice like the remote control that shuts off the alarm and then, I don't know, turns on the air conditioning?
I love that. Turning on the AC is a great way to think about the dopamine and oxytocin. Dopamine brings pleasure and calm, and oxytocin promotes bonding and trust.
So it cools the whole system down.
Exactly. And I really want to emphasize why this matters to you. This chemical shift is the essential first step. You cannot initiate neuroplasticity in a system flooded with cortisol.
Because cortisol keeps you rigid.
Right. It locks you into survival mode. Pulling the brain out of that survival state is what prepares it for actual physical changes.
Okay, that makes sense. The chemical shift prepares the site. But chemicals wash away, Turning off the survival mechanism for a few minutes feels great, but how do we get from a temporary AC blast to a permanent structural upgrade?
Well, this is where we transition from chemistry to anatomy. The SpiralSeekr material specifically details an 8-week practice that physically creates new connections.
Between the hippocampus and the ventral tegmental area,
Yeah.
right?
The hippocampus is heavily involved in memory formation, and the ventral tegmental area, or VTA, is a primary node in your reward circuitry.
Okay, got it.
In that stressed baseline state we talked about, those two regions operate pretty independently. But an 8-week intentional gratitude practice forces them to communicate simultaneously.
Wait, so we aren't just training ourselves to feel better. We are literally laying down new physical cables in our heads.
You are building a biological bridge. By repeatedly forcing the memory center to retrieve positive data and linking it to the reward center, you are demanding the creation of new synaptic connections.
That is incredible. It is like upgrading from a bumpy dirt road to a paved high-speed highway between your memory and reward centers.
Exactly. And the structural scans show it doesn't stop there. The anterior cingulate cortex, which is linked to empathy and calm, develops stronger functional connections to the medial prefrontal cortex.
Which handles reward and social cognition.
Right. And the profound implication here is that this specific rewiring allows the brain to route positive emotional experiences through your higher-order thinking centers.
So positive experiences are no longer just fleeting feelings that vanish.
No, they become deeply processed cognitive events.
That is amazing. But if we are building new physical highways in the brain, that construction project obviously takes time. You can't just build a highway overnight.
Not at all. It is a biological process.
So what is the exact timeline for these structural changes? Because the source lays out an 8-week timeline that looks like a massive trap for anyone trying this out.
It really is. Let's break down the 8-week timeline researchers observed. Weeks 1 through 3 are what you might call the invisible phase.
Right, because the brain scans remain completely identical to baseline, don't they?
Yes, completely identical. There are 0 structural changes visible on the scans, even though participants report slightly feeling better emotionally.
I would call that the danger zone. I mean, think about it for the listener. It is so tempting to quit a new habit in week 2 because you feel a bit better, but you aren't seeing massive life changes.
Oh, absolutely. People give up right when the real work is starting.
You completely miss the fact that the physical reconstruction of the brain hasn't even started yet. You are basically firing the construction crew before they pour the concrete.
That is exactly what happens. Your nervous system requires strict consistency over a 2-month period to consolidate these networks. During those first 3 weeks, the brain is doing microscopic cellular preparation.
So when do the actual structural changes show up?
It isn't until weeks 4 through 6 that the initial measurable increases in gray matter density finally occur.
Okay, so you have to push through that whole first month just to get the foundation laid.
Right. And then weeks 7 and 8 are when entirely new neural networks are fully formed and consolidated.
Okay, so knowing that the construction takes 8 weeks is only half the battle, what exactly are the instructions for the construction crew? What is the specific protocol?
The protocol is very specific, and general statements completely fail to generate the necessary brain activity.
So just walking around thinking, I should be more thankful does nothing.
Right, nothing structurally. The protocol involves writing down 3 specific things to be grateful for each evening, alongside a detailed explanation of why each matters.
Let me give an example to see if I have this right. So if I just write, I'm grateful for my dog, that fails the protocol.
Yes, that is a general statement. It fails.
But if I write, I'm grateful my dog rested his head on my foot while I was stressed because it made me feel grounded, that is the kind of precision required.
Right. That is exactly the precision required.
But why? Why does the brain care about the difference between those 2 sentences?
Well, it comes down to the underlying cognitive mechanism. Precise observations literally force the brain to actively connect specific memory targets to emotional rewards.
Oh, so the effort is the point.
Exactly. Generalities don't demand enough cognitive effort to spark neuroplasticity. You have to force those regions to synchronize under a high cognitive load to trigger the structural growth.
Wow. Okay, so let's say you cross that 8-week finish line, you follow the protocol perfectly. What is the ultimate result? How does your day-to-day life actually change once the scaffolding comes down?
The biggest shift is a permanent recalibration of your retrieval and attention systems.
Meaning you access memories differently.
Yes, you can voluntarily access positive memories with increasing ease because of those new pathways. But more importantly, your visual and emotional processing systems become actively biased towards scanning the environment for positive details.
Details that the baseline brain previously just filtered out.
Yeah.
It is like putting on a permanent pair of augmented reality glasses. Like suddenly these glasses highlight all the good things in your environment that you were previously blind to.
That is a brilliant analogy. The environment hasn't changed, but your brain's automatic filtering system has been fundamentally reprogrammed to work for you rather than against you. You're no longer fighting your brain to be happy.
That is so powerful. To briefly recap this journey for you today, we have gone from a stressed out amygdala, our blaring car alarm, to an immediate chemical relief of dopamine and oxytocin.
Right, the AC kicking on.
Exactly. And we took that all the way to a permanent 8-week structural rewiring that links memory to reward, simply by specifically writing down 3 things a day.
It is remarkable how much agency we actually have over our own neurobiology.
It really is. But before we wrap up this deep dive, where does this leave us?
Well, it leaves us with a pretty profound question to ponder long after we finish talking today.
Oh, what is that?
If a seemingly simple 8-week writing practice can literally rewire the physical anatomy of our brains to see the world differently, what other everyday, soft psychological habits might be hiding profound, untapped biological power to rewrite our reality?